The question I never asked the vet, the one I've been carrying for about 30 years now, is a short one. Was he scared? Rusty was our family dog, a rust and cream mutt my parents brought home when I was 6 years old and lost when I was 15. Medium build, short hair, the kind of dog who didn't seem to have strong opinions about his own breed. He was just Rusty. He was, as far as I was aware, the first being I ever genuinely talked to. I was there at the end. I held him. And I have spent a quiet, mostly private corner of my adult life wondering what those last hours felt like from his side of the room. I'm not a vet. I want to say that at the very start of this one, but over the past couple of years, I've read everything I could find about what actually happens inside a dog's mind near the end of life, what the science says, what it doesn't say, and what sits in the space between those two things. What I found surprised me. Not because there's a clean answer waiting at the end of it. It surprised me because I realized the question I'd been carrying for 30 years might not be quite the right question. If you're here today, I think I understand why. Someone you loved is already gone or getting close. You have your own version of that question. I'll tell you what the science says. I'll tell you where it runs out. And I'm not going to fill the empty space with guessing. I'm glad you're here. Let's look at it. Here's where I want to start. Not with what dogs feel near the end of their lives, but with what researchers think they almost certainly don't. When comparative cognition scientists like Mark Bekoff, a professor emeritus at the University of Colorado Boulder who has spent decades studying animal emotion and behavior, and Barbara King, a biological anthropologist whose work documented grief and mourning across dozens of species, discuss whether non-primate animals understand death, they're careful to separate two very different things. There's behavioral response to death, and there's conceptual understanding of death. Dogs have the first one. No serious researcher disputes it. Dogs who lose a companion change their behavior. They search, they become subdued. They mourn in the behavioral sense of the word. You've probably seen something like it yourself. The research confirms what you already know. But conceptual understanding of death, the awareness that death is universal, that it happens to every living thing including yourself, that it means a permanent end to experience, that appears to require a kind of self-reflective thinking, researchers don't believe dogs have. Metacognition, the capacity to think about your own thinking and to imagine a future version of yourself that simply ceases. This is not a diminishment of your dog. It's a description of a completely different relationship to time. Your dog doesn't carry Tuesday as separate from Wednesday. They don't hold a model of a future that goes dark. They don't have the narrative we build around our own ending. I used to think of this as a kind of sad absence, the thing they couldn't understand that we had to carry for them. The older I get, the less sure I am that's the right frame. I'll come back to that. What your dog is probably missing in those last 48 hours isn't body awareness. They are exquisitely aware of their body. We'll get to that. What they're missing is the story, the timeline, the countdown we write in our own heads and then, without meaning to, project onto theirs. So if they don't have the concept, what do they have? Here's where the science gets specific. Your dog is carrying roughly 300 million olfactory receptors. Those are the scent-sensing cells lining the inside of the nose. You are carrying around 6 million. That is not a difference in calibration. That is a fundamentally different instrument for reading the world. And what that instrument can do includes something researchers at Queen's University Belfast documented in a 2020-22 study published in PLOS One. They had people complete a stressful arithmetic task, then collected samples of their breath and sweat. Normal dogs, not trained medical alert animals, not specialist working dogs, were able to discriminate between the stressed samples and the baseline ones. Dogs can detect the chemical markers of stress in the air around you. Your dog has been reading your stress levels the entire time. Now think about what happens inside a room in those last 48 hours. You are almost certainly not calm. You are carrying an anticipatory grief that is real and large and entirely yours because you know what is coming. Your dog doesn't have that knowledge. But what they do have is their nose. And your smell has changed. The room has a charge it didn't have before. The person who is theirs is upset in a way that arrives in their nose before it reaches anywhere else. At the same time, research coming from groups at institutions like the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, whose scientists have spent decades studying how dogs form attachments to the people in their lives, consistently shows that dogs use their owners as what researchers call a secure base, the way a young child uses a trusted parent to regulate fear. Familiar presence doesn't just feel good to a dog. It actively settles them. Their stress responses change when you're in the room, when you're close, when there is contact. So in those last hours, what your dog is most likely tracking is this: the state of their own body, your emotional state, and whether the specific, known, familiar person is nearby. Not a calendar, not a clock counting down. You. Here's the part I want to be honest about. And I'll say plainly, I'm in this one too. A lot of what we project onto a dog's last 48 hours is our own experience in borrowed clothes. We know what's happening. We are watching them with that knowledge loaded behind our eyes. Every quiet moment looks like resignation. Every slow walk to the water bowl becomes evidence of something we should have caught sooner. Every labored breath sounds to us like fear. But here's what the behavioral picture actually tends to show. The stillness is real. The withdrawal toward quieter places is real. Dogs near the end of life do often seek lower stimulation spots, familiar ground, somewhere with less noise and movement. Veterinary behaviorists generally describe this as a response to physical discomfort, the body going inward in the way bodies do under sustained strain, rather than as anticipatory dread. I'm not a vet, and if you're going through this right now with your dog, those decisions belong with the professionals who actually know your animal, not a YouTube channel. But here's what the behavioral research also shows, and this is the part that stayed with me. Dogs at the end of life often don't only retreat, they also seek the person. Not out of confusion, not out of clinginess. Out of what that same research calls secure base behavior, they orient toward the most familiar anchor left in the room. That moment owners describe: the look, the eye contact that holds a little longer than usual, the way they find your hand, the way they settle when you come close and stay. I won't tell you that's nothing. The behavioral research on bonded dogs tells us they use eye contact to anchor themselves, but in those final hours, as their systems slow down and their energy fades, that long look might just be exhaustion. It might not be a conscious choice anymore. But here is what matters. Even as their body shuts down, the place their eyes physically rest is on you. What is probably not there? Not 48 hours of mounting dread, not a rehearsed awareness of a clock running out, not the story we write for them from our side of the room. A body going quiet, a room that smells different, a person still there. One more thing, and I want to be careful with it. The research I just walked through, the olfactory sensitivity, the cortisol detection, the attachment data, that can tell me something about what a dog is probably perceiving in those final hours. The inputs. What's coming in? It cannot tell me what it's like to be in that body. The science can show me a brain scan. It can show me cortisol data. It cannot show me what it's like, if there is anything it's like, to be Rusty at the end of that last night, sometime after 10 o'clock, when he stopped trying to make it back to his corner by the radiator. I've stopped reaching for that word. I don't think the word exists. And anyone who gives you a confident answer about what your dog was experiencing in those last hours, in either direction, pain or peace, is telling you something the evidence doesn't actually support. On either side. So, was he scared? I won't tell you no. What I can tell you with more confidence than I had at 15 years old is what he was probably experiencing instead of fear. His body had gone quiet and slow. The timeline had stopped mattering. We don't know exactly how much of the room he was still able to read, but we know what happens to a dog's nervous system when they are near their secure base. They settle. He wasn't doing math about the future. He was just existing. At the very end, next to the person who had always been his person. I keep returning to this. The absence of the concept, the fact that he didn't carry the story, the timeline, the knowing and the way we know, might be something closer to grace than to loss. Maybe. I want to be honest that this could be me reaching for something that feels better than the alternative. But maybe what mattered most in those final hours wasn't an ending. It was you, still there. That's what I believe Rusty had. I won't pretend I know more than that. I won't. The question I opened with tonight has been with me for about 30 years. I haven't answered it. I've tried to answer it honestly, which is a different thing. If you were there at the end with your dog, if you held them as they took their last breath, or sat beside them and wondered afterward whether you'd done enough, I want to ask you one thing. Say their name in the comments, just their name, if that's all you have. I read everyone. And the ones about the dogs you still miss, those are the ones I keep the longest. See you out there.